Great. Well, welcome everyone. We appreciate your being here this afternoon, and want to welcome you who are here face-to-face in Mobile, and we also want to welcome those of you who are joining us from across the country and around the world. I've always wanted to be like a CNN broadcaster, so that was my opportunity. But a sincere welcome to all of you. We have a dynamic team here today from Maricopa that's going to explain and give you some insights on their journey through the land of employee engagement and all the great things that they have done in their program and as it continues. So a couple of things here. Here are our learning objectives. You can see that we're going to share some design. We're hoping you'll leave with some ideas to design and implement an employee engagement program of your own. We're going to share some tips and methods and techniques, and we hope you can take those with you and use those tips to increase employee engagement and satisfaction and participation in your own organization. And then we're hoping that you'll have some ideas that you'll leave with that will leverage employee engagement, all with an eye to strengthening court performance. Because that is the whole purpose here, to engage employees so that you get a yield. Higher satisfaction, higher performance, lower errors, greater customer satisfaction, etc. So, just a quick question of who all is here. So if you would just give us a quick raise of your hand. So we're going to do our little audience assessment. How many of you are any judges here? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to dance around the pole here. How about whoa, I'm thinking I better turn it off and head on out right on now. So
we are very, very flexible.
Mr. Whoa, I think we're digging a bigger hole here. Oh my goodness gracious. So yes, well, we're all going to be dancing around the pole today. So my bad. So no judges, that's fine. Court administrators or clerks of court. Okay, lots of you. How about senior managers or middle managers in courts? Okay, that's almost the rest of you. Supervisors? We have any supervisors here? Okay. Do we have any people here from state court organizations? Okay, a couple of you. Very good. The rest, trial court organizations of sorts, and other, who didn't raise their hand? What organization are you with? Federal court. Excellent. Awesome. Great. Clerk of a federal, great, okay. How about then size of your jurisdiction? Large courts, and I'm going to let you decide large. Okay, so a lot of large courts. As you know, Maricopa is a large court, a large branch. How about medium courts? Medium size, okay. And then maybe smaller jurisdictions, 2, 3, 5, 10 judges. Okay, well, we've spent a lot of time talking about how they can share their experiences that are applicable not just in large jurisdictions. So we think a lot of the things that they're going to share they're scalable, and so you can adapt them to your respective organization, whether it be a federal court, a state court, or even a trial court. All right, and then urban and rural. I guess if we could just get a sense of maybe the rural jurisdictions or more rural. Okay, not so many rural jurisdictions, a couple. I guess that's by default. The rest of you are pretty urban then. Okay, see, I'm on my game. I'm on my game. After I got that little faux pas out of the way, we're good to go. Okay, well, so we have a big program here. Let me just quickly, I'm going to share a framework with you. I'm going to kind of tee up why employee engagement is important and what it is. And I might be preaching to or talking with the choir here because you're here, but if you encounter, maybe you're a fence sitter, you're not quite sure, we're going to arm you with some good reasons why it is important. You may believe it's important, but come across others in your organization who do not. Again, we're going to arm you with some good numbers, some compelling evidence that demonstrates why it's a good investment. Okay, so, oops, didn't want to do that. So why is employee engagement, why does it matter? There's proof. There's overwhelming evidence over the past 10 to 15 years that it matters. And it matters because when employee engagement levels go up, everything gets better. I'm going to repeat that, it's so important. When employee engagement levels go up, everything gets better. People are more productive. There's better, greater customer satisfaction, higher quality service. There's fewer errors. There's higher quality work, lower absenteeism, lower turnover. There's even beginning to be evidence that there's better health outcomes. And it's like, whoa, really? Employee engagement, higher employee engagement levels, it looks like, are leading to better well-being, better health. High cortisol levels, we know, contribute to diabetes and heart disease and on and on. And when you can reduce stress, you provide an environment that employees are engaged in, they're giving it their all, they're all this discretionary effort, there's benefits. So lo and behold, your employee health benefit costs, I guess, too, potentially could go down. So lots and lots and lots of evidence. Here's a definition I want to share with you. And on the sheet of the goldenrod sheet of paper that was passed out and that are around the room, it's also online for those of you who are viewing through the streaming or watching through video. I like this definition because it's a joint balanced definition in my opinion. It's not one-sided. And this implies that it's a mutual relationship, a mutual responsibility of both employee plus employer to create an engaging work environment or to focus on how do we make sure that employees have maximum job satisfaction and have maximum job contribution. So it's not just making employees happy. That's a part of it. But the maximum job contribution, employees need to know that a direct line of sight into what they do every day contributes to the bottom line, whether that's providing justice or fair and timely resolution or high quality services to the people that you serve, or whether it's contributing to law and order, a civil society, rule of law, all those big things that they have to understand how they contribute to that. And that's no small feat, because a clerk that might do documents or data entry, or a clerk that stands at the window taking papers, has to get that every person they touch, it matters. And so this direct line of sight, making sure that the employee understands how what they do every day contributes to the bottom line of the organization is key. So this definition of employee engagement is not about the employer doing everything to make the employee happy, nor is it vice versa, that the employee has to do everything and gets little from the employer. It's really a mutual joint responsibility. So when you're designing your own employee engagement programs, I guess one of my questions to you is, I think part of it is negotiating the understanding that this isn't us just doing for you, it's us working together to create this environment where you can do the best you can do every day. We'll treat you fairly, we'll provide you with the resources, but we're also expecting you to give us your all and to give us your discretionary effort and go above and beyond to help make our organization succeed. So that's why I like this definition, but there are other ones on your sheet there in the middle, and they include a lot of these concepts. Okay, I wanna, let's just do a quick self-assessment here. I've got 6 questions, and I'd like each of you, to answer the 6 questions using a 10-point rating scale. Strongly agree to strongly disagree. Okay, so let me give you a couple benchmarks in there. If you obviously strongly agrees on one end, strongly disagrees on the other, but if you do a 6, it's like slightly agree. If you do a 5, it's slightly disagree. Okay, so that's kind of the benchmarks there in the middle. So this year, if you'll just write your answer down 1 to 10, a number, between 1 and 10 on your sheet of paper. So employees in your organization understand where you're going, what your vision is, and what your priorities are. Do you strongly agree or strongly disagree and somewhere in between? So that's Q1. Q2, all employees in my organization see how they contribute to helping achieve organizational goals. That's that direct line of sight. Does everybody understand how what they do helps achieve the organizational goals? Everybody got a number? Okay. Question 3, senior managers. Key word, senior managers. I'm not talking first line supervisors now. Senior managers in my organization routinely, second key word, meet with your employees to understand their needs, interests, and concerns. Again, a number. Q4. Employees in your organization have opportunities to learn new skills and be involved in a variety of projects. Okay. Q5. Employees in your organization feel valued and appreciated by senior management. They see that senior managers care about them. What would you think? What do you think? And the last one here is, it's a standard practice in my organization to set personal goals with employees at least annually, and then give ongoing, meaningful feedback throughout the year. So it's more than a once a year performance conversation. It's more than a once a year setting goals. It's kind of an ongoing checking in, etc. All right, everybody have your numbers? So now just quickly add up your numbers and divide by 6, and what's your average? Oh, that was a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer that. So the threshold for creating an engaging workplace or having high engagement levels is very high. It's a bold number. If you're 8 and above, you're well on your way to having high engagement levels. If you're 7 or less, either on average or on any of these individual questions, then there's room for improvement. Now, there's always room for improvement, right? We're never really there. But these are 6 very key questions, and there are others, to assess your employee engagement levels. And so as we think about, as the Maricopa team here talks about their experiences in the program that they're working on, the process that they engaged in, you may have some takeaways around these 6 questions and others. So, all right. Like to just show a very short video, and then I am going to pass the baton to Ray Billett. Oh, all of the stats that are in this are on your sheet. You don't have to take any notes. do you have people on your team that are sinking the boat? And do you have some paddlers? I suspect we all do, right? I did that. Yeah, I did that. So the question is then, you want to keep those that are your your paddlers paddling. You want the folks that are sitting on the fence that aren't doing as much, kind of along for the ride. You want to shift them, of course, to the stroking for you. And the facts, just the last thing here before I pass the baton, there's some facts on the second page of this goldenrod sheet, again, available online, that are pretty staggering. The engagement levels across the U.S. in particular, there is international research as well, but has stayed pretty stable over the last 7 years. But it's inched up recently. Since August of 2015, we're now reaching almost a third of the workforce that says they're fully engaged. Okay, that's a good thing because it's been 30% or less. So we are inching up a little bit, but think about that for a second. To me, that's staggering, because if 33% are saying they're fully engaged, satisfied with my job, and maximum job contribution, that means 2/3 aren't. 2/3 aren't. So I think any golden nugget or any refinement you can take from today's discussion, both with us and among yourselves, back and apply it in your organization to, again, just take an inch forward, it's going to reap benefits for you, both in productivity, satisfaction, service, all those things that we talked about earlier. And then one other thing that I want to mention to you is that, you know, we don't have to guess anymore what helps drive engagement. The research is out there. There are engagement drivers. And so you can look at this set of drivers, and there's, again, a list here, and I know Ray and Dana are going to talk to how they've used some of these drivers in their own work. But we don't have to guess. That's the beauty of this. You can kind of pick things where you may think you're a little weak in or need to strengthen, and you can go back and do some application here and hopefully reap some benefits. So, all right, so that provides the framework for what is employee engagement and why is it important. And Ray and others, you got caught, are going to describe what they've done in Maricopa.
I think you may have to turn yours off then, because it'll... Okay, we're going to talk about what we did in Maricopa County, and Dana and Cindy are going to walk you through all the steps we took in our court to produce what we believe was an excellent employee satisfaction survey, not only the tools that we used and how we did it, but how also that information drove a lot of the things that just occurred in our recent strategic planning process. But before I do that, I think it's important, and I think it's important for you all, if you're thinking about doing an employee satisfaction survey, is really, you got to take a look at your organization and take a hard look at it and assess it. For me, I walked in, I've only been in Maricopa County for a little over 3.5 years, and we conducted this survey, 2.5 years ago. So I walked into a court, number one, that was very well respected. I walked in and I followed a legend, if you will, in this business, in Marcus Renkensmeyer. How many of you know Marcus? Of course he is. And so I knew walking into this organization that I had there were some big shoes to fill, so there's some big things that I had to look at. But I also knew that our employees in Maricopa County hadn't had a raise in 5 years. They had seen a fairly significant downsizing of more than 500 jobs were lost just a few years before I got there. So for me, I needed to understand what was going on inside of the employees' minds about our organization. And also, as we noted, Maricopa County is large, not only large in the numbers, but we're 9,200 square miles. We have courthouses. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I was dancing with the pole this time.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Sorry about that. I will keep peeking my head over here, but I'll go stay over here. So anyway, And so we had some specific issues. You know, we have do business in 42 sites. We have more than 3,000 employees. So it's a large organization. But I think what you're going to find when they walk through some of these things that we did, that you can use them, scale them down. You know, communicating, and when you do your assessment of your organization, you got to how am we going to communicate this? Because that is important. And we spent a lot of time, my team and I and the rest of our executive team, on figuring this out. What best way? There are multiple ways to communicate. You're going to see all of them, whether it's in written form, video, or it's in person. And we did all those things when we worked on our employee satisfaction survey. So for me, that was the first step, to take a look. Then I think it was soon after I got there, Maricopa was in a regular pattern, a regular schedule of conducting employee satisfaction surveys. And then soon after, they came to me and said, hey, Ray, we want to do our every 2-year survey. And how many of you have been involved in employee satisfaction surveys before? Can I ask you, what is the biggest problem you have had with those? The survey itself?
Responses, not receiving responses.
Hmm?
Managing the follow-through and the expectations of the team.
For me, that is exactly the same thing, which is why I balked a lot of times on, do we need to do another survey? Because, just point me back over, okay? Because the worst thing we can do as leaders in an organization is put hope out there and then do nothing about it. Ask for their opinions and do nothing about it. So one of the first things we did when they came to me was we took a look and went to work on our assessment tool and looked very closely at it. Before this, the Superior Court, the judicial branch, was using the same tool that was used by Maricopa County. It was 130 questions and bogged down with things that made no sense for your court employees. So that's the first thing we did, is we eliminated those and we made specific questions around our organization. Secondly, for me as a leader, and perhaps you as in your organization, you want to be able to make a comparison. So I strongly recommend you use the core tools because that gives you an ability. Michelle, that gives me ability to see how my organization stacks up against Los Angeles on the same, if we're using the same tools. And if you're doing something, again, for me, if you're doing something and your rating of your employees is out of sight and mine is down here, I'm going to call you because I want to find out what you're doing that we may be able to do in our own county. So again, you need to pay specific attention to those questions and make sure they're appropriate for your organization. And then this last piece, which is really my thing. I am a huge advocate of inserting procedural fairness wherever I can. It doesn't matter what the context is. You heard this morning the presenter, Sam Brook, talk about procedural fairness and what it meant for them as far as their work. For us, and in the ESS, and I sat down and I thought about this. You know, we talk about procedural fairness and we know the components, right? We know, go ahead, you want to change it? We know in the courtroom that, you know, these are the 4 components that we know are critical to successful procedural fairness. Having a voice, I was listened to by the judge. Being neutral, I believe the judge was impartial. I believe the judge treated me with respect, and I trust the judge to decide my case. Those 4 elements. But those same 4 elements, if you think about this, apply to your organization. There should be no less procedural fairness when you're dealing with your organization, just like you're dealing with people who come and need our services. So this is one of the things that I really worked with the team about, making sure we embed this as a theme as we go forward. And making sure that, again, that they believe they have a voice. Our employees have the voice. That's the survey. They believe they're being treated fairly. We treat them with courtesy and respect. And they trust us to do what is in their best interests. So those are kind of the things that we had to get out and started and really resolved before we kicked off our ESS. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, and they're going to step you through the process.
So I think we get a little scared when we talk about communication plans. We think of PIOs and people, you know, that have those skills. And what we realize is, okay, so how are we going to let people know why they wanted to be a part of this. Remember, they had some years of doing this and not sure we trusted, or they trusted that. So I just kind of want to walk through a little bit of it. So we spent some pre-planning. We wanted to get Ray's vision and understand exactly what he wanted the outcomes to be. And then we basically got the survey distributed, and we did something unique this year, or 2 years ago, and that was we did it online. Prior to that, they had to come in a room, and they really were a little leery about whether they were trusted or not, and it was kind of a weird process. Basically, then we collected the results, and then the executive team kind of looked at that, and all they were really doing is just seeing if there was something super glaring. They were not going to do anything with them. They just wanted to see it. And then one of the cool things is we put it back out on the web, and we let our employees see them for really what they said. And there was a complete transparency, which was super new to the organization. And then over here is just some things that we kind of did, and they aren't pertinent to right now, but just some things we did for follow-up. But we wanted to make sure before we started, we had a plan. Because once you start down the road, if you kind of don't have a plan, people start to see that. So we were wanting to stick to the plan. So basically what we did was we got our IT group to create this little splash page, and down there was the actual place to take the survey, which was new and kind of exciting. You know, we got away from the drab and the grays and the blues and got into some fun ways to market the whole plan. And then basically, I will go ahead and do a disclaimer. It was my idea to do a video because, again, we had 9,200 square miles, and this guy couldn't do that. So how are we going to solicit as well as introduce him as our new judicial branch administrator? So we created a video, and I want to show you the video. I want to say that, remember, you don't have to do videos, but you do need the top guy to do some sort of message. So here it is.
Hi, I'm Ray Billett, the Judicial Branch Administrator. I want to talk to you today about the importance of participating in this year's Employee Satisfaction Survey and how we plan to move ahead on your suggestions. But first, let me take a moment and introduce myself. While I've had the great opportunity to meet many of you over the last few months, I know that still many of you don't know me, my background, my vision for our future. I came to Maricopa County because I wanted to be part of an organization that is innovative and continually strives to be the best trial court in the country. In September of 2012, I left my court administrator job after 20 years in Pittsburgh to join you here in the judicial branch. I have devoted much of my time learning about our organization, its strengths, its opportunities, and its unique culture. As a public servant, I have committed my professional life to continually seeking better ways to support the judiciary and serve our constituents. That has been and will always be my vision. I know the demands placed on courts have dramatically impacted what we do and how we do it. These changing conditions can be a source of great frustration for our employees. But I also know they can be a catalyst for change in how we do things, how we perceive our work, how our organization functions, and how we can meet the changing needs of our employees. Before we can make real progress in this area, we need to know your thoughts about the organization and how it can be improved to enhance a supportive, progressive, and meaningful work environment. So, I'm asking for your help by participating in this year's Employee Satisfaction Survey. This year, we are taking a new approach and making a few changes. It is a new survey, one that incorporates all of the questions recommended by the National Center for State Courts, as well as some questions we've used in the previous surveys. The best part? It's going to be administered online, and you can take it right from your own computer. I am committed to listening to you and making the changes that I can. It is important to me that we are a united, productive, and happy workforce. I cannot promise you that things will change overnight. Some of the changes you identify will most likely require the approval and collaboration of others, both internal and external to our organization. But I can commit to you that I will make every effort to move forward with the changes that seek to make the judicial branch a better place to work, improve our business practices, our processes, and our communication, and place the interests of those we serve at the front of the line. The survey will be rolled out on the court's internet site on Monday, July 29th, and remain available to you until the close of business on Friday, August 16th. The results will be tabulated and made available on the internet for all to view. Next, internal meetings with your department administrator and deputy court administrator will be scheduled. This will allow every employee the opportunity to participate in building consensus on what is most important and identifying what you believe we do well. Once the department meetings have concluded, the executive team and I will sit down and learn from you. Based on this information, we will develop strategies to address our priorities. I will then be visiting all of our sites for town hall-like meetings so that I can discuss with you our plans for moving forward. So please join me in getting involved in the survey and allowing me to hear what you have to say about the judicial branch of Maricopa County. Thanks, and have a great day.
So I show this video to stress the importance of the leader has to be the person who drives this. It has to come from the top. I want to make sure I disclaim quickly that you don't have to do a video. If you're a small jurisdiction, I mean, again, Ray couldn't do that many. We have 3,600 employees, although he did a heck of a job when he did town halls. But we just wanted the message to get out, and we wanted people to see him, and I think he presents well on a video, so again, that could be your deciding factor as well. So then what we did was, after we did the employee satisfaction survey, we decided we had to do one more component that had never existed before. So I developed a training. I kind of took the appreciative inquiry concept, although I know that's a way different kind of thing. But I wanted to use it so that what happened is managers and directors met with their staff, saw the results, and said, all right, let's decide what's the projects we want to work on. Now, the biggest part of that training was to make sure that managers and supervisors didn't come up with solutions and that they listened. So they were demonstrating, kind of following what Ray had already said in the video. So that was the important piece too. So they basically had sheets of paper up on walls that were like, what can we do? What shouldn't we do anymore? Because we have a lot of things we do we shouldn't do anymore. And then what's some parking lot things? And some of the departments actually took the parking lot and made those low-hanging fruit projects. But then that, along with the employee satisfaction survey information, was fed up to the executive team. So we kind of really hit every component. We hit, okay, we did an anonymous survey, and then we did a survey that was our discussion and a listening session about how did we really think that people needed to know we were really hearing the situation. So from that, I'm going to let Dana go ahead and do what we actually did as far as the next steps to that.
So I'd like to share with you in a more detailed level the next steps that we took to move the initiative forward. At this point in the project, we have all of the information that we gathered via the tool, the survey itself, and the additional information that was generated during the departmental meetings. And the departmental meetings were helpful for all the reasons that Cindy just shared with you, but they also enhanced the information that we got from the survey, because sometimes it's really easy for us, some of us that are looking at the results, to try to determine what somebody really means by what the information they've provided, and we could be really off the mark. So we used those department meetings to try to really drill down and get some additional information about what people were saying to us via the survey. And we took all of that data, the executive team, and we tried to categorize that into, to see if it kind of fell out into some general categories, and we were lucky that it did. Now, there were some things that were outliers, and as Cindy mentioned, there were some things that people had provided via the survey that were very departmental specific, or maybe specific to a particular work group. And we pushed those back to the appropriate level people to work through those issues in their areas. But for the organization as a whole, we came up with the 3 areas of work-life balance, or work-life blending is kind of the new terminology that a lot of people use now. The area of communication. And I know we asked earlier how many of you had done an employee satisfaction survey before, but I'd like to see, for those of you that have done a survey, how many of you identified communication as an area of concern? Yeah, I think that's an area of concern regardless of the size of the organization, and it's always going to be one of the #1 themes. So that was one of our themes as well. And then we had a lot of responses that fell into the category of innovation. So next, we needed to drill down just a little bit further. Now we have our themes, and we need to determine where did we think we could use some committees to get people involved, really see some action on the results. Like people had mentioned, that's a place that a lot of us have fallen down in the past when we've done these surveys. And we were able to identify these 6 committees. Under the work-life area, we started with alternative work schedules. And I'd be interested to know this too. Do any of you use alternative work schedules in your courts now? I see just a couple. Yeah, we had alternative work schedules in Maricopa prior to the economic downturn. And when we had to implement our reduction in force that Ray mentioned earlier, we had to do away with that. Our coverage issues were just such that we couldn't do it anymore, and I see some people shaking their heads, so you've had that experience as well. And that is really important to our workforce, and as Brenda mentioned earlier, and you see, I think on the goldenrod sheet, that job flexibility is a main driver to job satisfaction. And so that was one of the big areas that our workforce identified. Bilingual pay under work-life, and again, that was something we had a differential prior to the economic downturn for our Spanish speakers. We had to take that away on the Superior Court side, and we cut it in half on our probation side. And so there is a lot of staff that are really interested in us bringing back bilingual pay. And then lastly, under the work-life area, I'm sorry, go ahead.
On the bilingual pay, do you guys test people? I used to work for an insurance company, and before they do the pay, they had to pass a test both orally and in writing.
We do use, I'm sorry. We do use a test, but it's just an oral proficiency test. We don't have a written test. And then lastly, the training area under work-life. And again, this goes to a lot of the things that are really important to our Gen Y and Gen X staff, that there's a lot of different components that fell up under the training area, career development, succession planning, all kinds of different things. So that was one committee that was identified. Then we broke our communication area into 2 different committees, the first being interdepartmental, and the second committee to focus on communication between bench and staff. And then lastly, under that innovation category, we had a technology committee. So the next part of the communication of this, so you've seen the videos, those all took place before we got to this point in the process, and now we've identified the committees and we need to communicate that to the workforce. And we decided for us that a good vehicle for that was going to be the use of what we called town halls. And basically these were a roadshow. And this was the first time that Ray was at a lot of the locations probably seen by a lot of the workforce in a face-to-face environment. He teamed up with both of our chief probation officers in juvenile and adult to conduct them with the probation staff as well. And it provided an opportunity for there to be some interaction with the staff. But the purpose, by and large, was to provide the explanation of the results, where we were in the process, the committees that had been developed, and it was an opportunity to have that call for action and to tell the workforce that we were going to be soliciting volunteers for the committees. I would be lying if I told you that they went perfectly well at every location. We have some naysayers in our workforce, and we did have some of those naysayers that showed up for the town halls. And as I'm sure some of you may have experienced in the past, there was a little bit of, why are we doing this again? We've done this a million times before. Nothing ever changes. Nothing ever comes out of it. And again, we had that chance for that interaction, and Ray committed to those folks that, just as he had mentioned in the video, after the committee work is done, what we can commit to is that every one of the recommendations will be looked at. Every one will be analyzed. We may not be able to implement every one of those recommendations, but if we don't, we're going to let you know why. What happened? Why was it that we weren't able to do that? And so as the new administrator, he tried to get people to buy into giving us another chance.
For those of you who may want to do this or have done this, the experience when you're up there, and our workforce, as probably yours is can be outspoken on issues. And there was a cross section of people from brand new employees to people who had been with us for 30 years or more. And those sometimes are the people who are most difficult on these, because they've probably seen a number of people come out there talk about things. Why is this different? Honestly, it's a fair question. It's a question you should be ready to answer when someone asks that of you. And for me, I had the benefit and the luxury of being brand new. I didn't have any history with this workforce. But I also knew that we had done our homework, if you will, with what we were going to do. And how we were going to go about it. As Dana just said, you can never promise you're going to do any one thing. You can promise you're certainly going to evaluate it and do your best you can to implement it, if you can. But they were interesting. Sometimes.
Lively. They were lively. And then lastly, in those town halls, like I mentioned, we wanted to solicit the volunteers. And so the way that we did that, just for ease for us, frankly, because we were in so many different locations, is we used just a little online application, very general information, what's your name, what's your job title, what location do you work at, what committee are you interested in? And then we did ask each of them to provide us with a little blurb about why they were interested in the work of that committee. And then we took all of those results and we tried to make the committees as representative as we could. We used people from both of the probation departments, from the Superior Court, from the different departments, criminal, family, whatever the case may be. And we made sure that we included judges' direct staff as well. So we had some JAs and bailiffs that had asked to volunteer or who had volunteered. We actually had more volunteers than we had slots on our committees, which was a great thing. And because we couldn't utilize everyone who had volunteered, Ray sent each and every individual a note thanking them for their offer of volunteering. So now the committees are formed and we're ready to get to work on the actual work at hand. Because some of these committees, you saw some of the topics were pretty complex, and I actually chaired the Alternative Work Schedule Committee, which is a very complex issue, not only from a coverage perspective, but we had some challenges before when we used alternative work schedules. And the committee was very thoughtful about their work. So some of the work of some of these committees has been pretty ongoing. It's taken quite a while. And we wanted to have a tool to use to keep the workforce informed of the work that was going on so that they didn't think it was just a black hole that, something's going on over here, but we really don't know anything about it. So this shot right here is actually just the shot of the main page for what we call our Employee Satisfaction Survey portal. And you can see it just has up in the one corner, like when's the next meeting, the scope of the committee's work, the members of the committee. So if someone's interested in talking directly with one of the committee members, they're listed there, as well as a photograph in case sometimes in an organization as large as ours, you may not know someone's name, but you might know their face. Minutes, agendas, all those kinds of things, and then materials that the committees were using for research, that type of thing. We're planning to alter this a little bit as we move into how this rolls into our strategic planning phase, and Ray will talk a little bit more about that later. Oh, I should have done that earlier. I'll apologize. While we were working on this initiative, we were really fortunate that there were a couple of other initiatives that were going on at the same time that really weren't related to begin with to the Employee Satisfaction Survey, but they provided us with an opportunity to reinforce the work that was going on. The first of those was Judicial Education Day, And our judges have a day in October every year where they go off-site, and there's a committee of judges that put together an agenda for their training for the day. Well, it just so happened that they had identified employee engagement as one of their topics the year that we were rolling this out. So that was just very fortunate for us that we were able to reinforce that. They asked us in HR and the training department to help them do a little survey before their training day, which we did. And for their staffs, it was more specific to their particular, the way that their divisions are set up. But they compiled all those results, and they had a nationally known engagement speaker for their plenary session that day. So that was really nice to have that reinforcement. The second thing was we rolled out a new performance evaluation tool in January of last year. And I'm sure this happens in none of your organizations, but in our organization, we had what we call ratings creep, where we started with a level of performance that we think is where you're doing a really good job. It's the middle level, basically, and that there should be these things beyond that move you up into the next couple higher levels. And I see people shaking their heads. Well, when we rolled out last year, and because we just finished our first year, I could share this, we had 74% of our staff that were in the top 2 categories in terms of our ratings. We have a 5 category rating scale. And we decided that we really wanted to make that eval tool much more meaningful. And so we took the focus off of the ratings as much as we possibly could. You know, you can't really do that totally. And put it on the feedback. And again, back to the engagement. You know, what do you want from me? What do you expect from me? What do I want you to provide me in terms of some direction as my manager? And then tell me about it all year long. Don't just get me at when that performance evaluation date comes around. So I have to say I'm very pleased. I think we've done really well for year one, and we finished now with 39% of our employees in the top 2 categories, and the majority of our employees at what we call an achieves level. And that's not that we don't have fantastic employees, because we do, but it's just that one of the ways that we disengage some of our really strong paddlers on our boat is by giving everybody the same high rating, and they're like, why am I doing this when you're giving, this person over here the exact same? So that was part of that.
What percentage of your success did you attribute Sorry. What percentage of your success would you attribute to having the judges be a large part of this?
Wow, that's a good question. Ray, do you want to take that? I'm not sure I know.
I'm interested to hear what your answer is.
Well, I think that, just the fact that they were willing to say this is something that we want to work at too, I think that that can't help but, move the organization forward. We're all on the same page. We all think this is important. Do I know a percentage? I don't.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, the number gets bigger and bigger. I mean, it seems like every week, every month, they looked at us with that leery eye, but now they're like really into it. And it was a vulnerable Gen Y judge that actually said, I don't know how to manage people, so can you help us? So it's weird that they're stepping slowly, almost like our employees. They're catching up fast, though, to being almost at the same level as everybody else in engagement. And I think they're surprised.
I think that percentage would be very high if you have the judicial engaging in employees in a positive manner, because you could have the opposite, judicials engaging employees in a negative manner.
You are exactly right.
I would agree.
One of the things that we didn't do that I missed was doing a better job at advocating what we were doing with the judges. I really kind of missed this. I mean, in hindsight, looking back, I would have had more of a campaign I'm sorry, you hear me now? My apologies. More of a campaign to get them understanding what we're doing and getting them on board. But so that's one thing we missed, but that's a good thing to keep in mind. Sorry.
Do you have a question?
What percentage of your staff was, say, 5? I mean, what's the appropriate level? for your organization? What's 4? What's 3? I mean, when do you consider it successful? Is 39%, as you were saying, is that successful?
We didn't benchmark any particular percentage, but again, what we were trying to do is get the supervisors and managers off of our evaluation tool has been tied to money previously. And so, again, what happened is we just got the creep up to, everybody in our organization being the best. And again, we have fantastic employees, so I don't want to say that they're not. But for those, sometimes supervisors use that as it's just easier to just say all of my employees are this, and that disengages some of our really top performers because they feel like they're carrying more of a share of the workload, and the person next to them who maybe isn't is getting the exact same thing, and then thus the same increase in pay.
What differentiates the 5 from the 3? I mean, ideally speaking, Sherry shouldn't know what my score was. So how is that happening? And what differentiates between 5 and a 3?
Well, from an HR
Is it a money thing, as you said? Or
Oh, no.
it's not now?
It should be. Actually, the way that we rolled our tool out is that 3 being, let's say, the achieves level, is that is somebody who's really doing an adequate job, doing a good job, and then the next level up, then each department has some metrics that they're using for what that means in that department. But lastly, our top level, we tried to say that that's not sustainable year on year, that it should be something that is so spectacular this one year that everybody in the organization kind of knows about it. And so it isn't something that you would expect to see in an employee every single year.
So if I could take just one more stab, I think what you did with your rating scale is you tried to eliminate the inflated ratings.
Yes.
So they tried to make the middle be kind of acceptable, a good level of performance. Not how, like, if we get a 3 out of a 5, we think, oh, that's bad. But you tried to kind of shift, I think, the norm that 3 was good. And that, so they have more of a bell curve, right? So if you meet job expectations, you get a 3, that's good. But if you excel, you get the 4 and the 5. If you don't meet expectations, then you've got the tail out meeting the 1 and the 2. Now, did I misstate
No,
that?
I think that's exactly right. But more importantly, we tried to get away from the ratings as much as we possibly could and make it about the feedback, and thus the engagement piece, the ongoing discussion between the supervisor and the employee about what the goals were that were set for that particular period of time.
So we have a couple of additional questions.
One specific thing, the tool we created actually has the supervisor sitting down with the whole department, and the department decides what succeeds, what's outstanding. It's not the supervisor saying at the time of the evaluation, this is what I determined. The whole team. There were tools created on our evaluation. It's not just.
I like your ideas. In some of the larger courts, what we're hearing from our supervisors and managers is, we're saying the same thing about, the same person who's been here 20 years. They're a good employee, but we don't have the time to write these long narratives. That's what we used to have to write, these long narratives to give examples of everything in every category. And so they are trying to sort of tell us, you don't have to write so much, just write something as you have in the past, you've had a great year. So it's always, I think, that push and pull where if you have to write a lot of these evaluations, it's very difficult sometimes for that manager to come up with something that's unique. Your strong employees generally continue to be high performers, and then you have the people that are doing their job, but it's that difficult thing about how much time do you spend writing narratives versus and I personally feel it should be focusing on the everyday feedback rather than this once a year. I think you're right on there.
Absolutely, and that's what we tried to do, was focus that. And if I had the winning combination for performance evaluations, I'd be working as a consultant and making a lot more money than I am currently.
Well, and I would just say that the research on employee engagement is less about that annual put everything down in writing and more about the conversation, and not just the once a year, but the ongoing throughout the year. So.
My question goes back to the employee satisfaction surveys. I've been with our court for about 20 years and just recently took the court administrator position about a year ago, and we had some pretty overwhelming, broad problems to address, and we utilized an employee satisfaction survey. But I thought I heard you say that you conduct these every year. Is that correct?
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years. And I guess what I'm struggling with now is we're about a year and a half since our survey, and some of the initiatives that we have are going to take some time. So I'm hesitant to do another survey soon before we resolve some of these issues. But I was curious, how do you manage those issues that you're not quite finished with, or are you thinking that perhaps maybe some of the solutions or even the problems have evolved, and that's why you're going ahead and doing them again? Or
We're not committed. I haven't authorized the next survey, and I don't think I will until, and I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, just how we now bridge this ESS stuff with our strategic planning.
Okay.
And a lot of these things you're hearing about are now identified as projects.
Okay.
So I, like you, I don't want to start another survey without having addressed all of these issues first. So we may go 3 years before another, because I think it's that important that we go through, because of the promises, if you will, that I stood before our organization and gave them, that we need to be answerable for all these issues.
Right.
Some of them we're not going to be able to do, but we're going to go through that process first, then we'll come back and do the next survey. But some of the things they've identified, just so you know, are going to take a lot longer than a year. So some of them are big things. So
Right.
does that help?
It does help, thank you.
If you don't have to stick to a regular 2 years, I'm not. So.
Well, as far as the performance evaluations, we're looking for new ones too. So are you willing to share perhaps some examples that you have?
Anything we have, you can have.
Yeah,
Wonderful. I will be reaching out. Thank you.
Hold on, the mic's coming. I'm coming. Thanks, Steph.
Did you do any calibration sessions between divisions to make sure a 4 was a 4 across, all the different divisions? You know how some managers are more easily swayed towards the 4 and the 5?
We didn't do that from the HR side of the house, but the department administrators did work on that as a team. And we have done some monitoring of the scores as they've come in. And
We did it in our court, and our HR department actually ran it, and we did some individual ones within divisions, but it worked a lot better to have the HR division there kind of talking about what they were seeing across all the different court divisions and the satellite courts and that sort of thing, so kind of bringing it all together.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, we only implemented what we considered to be phase 1, and we have a second phase that will be hopefully rolling out in January of 17. So, and then we do have one other initiative that's coming up that we hope will reinforce the engagement initiative, and that is an onboarding program. We currently use, we have people come in, they do all their necessary paperwork in HR before they start, get their badge, that kind of thing, and then they go to our new employee orientation. Sometimes, hopefully that happens in the first month. Sometimes it doesn't because of workload. It just hasn't really worked the way that we'd like for it to. And there's a lot of research around onboarding and employee engagement in the long run. And so we are planning to roll out an initiative either late this spring or early this summer. And that involves, we're going to take our whole day NEO down to a half day and leave that as just the motivational piece for employees. It'll include, I think, a courtroom experience. But we're going to take some of those really boring policy things that we in HR need to make sure are covered right away, and they've been put online, and some interactive tools to make them a lot more fun for employees. We have a really cute one around our e-communications policy. And lastly, they'll be assigned like a peer buddy. And that person will be responsible for being with them from the first day, and those peer buddies are actually going to be trained, and so that'll be a consistent approach throughout the organization, and we hope that that'll raise our engagement levels as well. So having said all of that, I'm going to pass it back to Ray.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I am.
I could have used a peer buddy when I got there. Everybody ran. Okay, so in our last few minutes with you, and then we're going to open it up. I think we probably have some more questions, but you know, we've talked about why it's important and why we need to do employee satisfaction surveys, and then we just walked you through some of the major emphasis and major points of the program we conducted. But in the end, what does it mean? Well, for us, it meant driving our strategic planning process. That's what it means. The things we talked about, we had 7 committees, right? Is that what we had, 7? 20 people on each committee. There were 140 people participating. I'm sorry?
Those are big committees.
Big committees. Well, I don't know how much we talked about it, but you know, we wanted a cross-section of employees. And in Maricopa County, and you'll do your own assessment in your own organization, but we're kind of in 3 distinct units. The court unit, which is Superior Court, and then there's judicial or juvenile probation and adult probation. And so it was critical to the executive team and those that you know were really driving this, that we had a cross-section of people from all of those, because this was a cross unit, this was a judicial branch issue. And you heard when she introduced me, I said judicial branch administrator, because for us, that's important, because that means something different than just a Superior Court administrator. So anyway, so it drove, and it is right now driving our strategic planning process. We are just finishing up our latest project plan, which goes from this year, 2016, to 2018. And I can tell you I have the draft document, which is hot off the press, that I just got before I got here. I believe I counted from the recommendations that came out of those committees, 5 made it to our strategic planning process and are identified as projects that the planning team, which includes judges, administrators, and others, have identified as being important, as things we need to do. Yes, a lot of them are about employee, the work-life issue. And we had some very heated discussions in these meetings about bringing back bilingual pay and what it's going to cost us, and this work schedule issue. But in the end, the strategic planning group agreed with the employees. We need to take a look at this and bring it back. So my point being is we're coming full circle from all that work the employees did from the ground up, has now made it to the body that's going to determine what our priorities are and how we're going to go about achieving them. So that's what this has done for us. And as I mentioned in answer to your question, I want to get some of these done or substantially done before we undertake another survey. Because, yes, ma'am.
Oh, wait.
Sorry. Okay. When you say bilingual differential, if I speak Mongolian,
No.
well, why is that different than Spanish, let's say?
It's a culture where we're at. Our community is, we have a high population of Spanish-speaking
So you
individuals.
identified those individuals that you felt could get a differential, but
They identify themselves.
how?
Our employees identify themselves.
No, I understand, but how do you determine what languages you will give a differential for and which ones you will not?
Based on need.
So it's based on need.
Yeah. We have, obviously, Maricopa County, we have a large population. Well, you may raise a point. I'll defer. The program was started before I was there. Do you have anything you want to add, Dana, please?
It is based on need. Actually, one of the recommendations from the Bilingual Pay Committee is that we base the number of people who get it on the usage. So even if you speak Spanish and you work in a back office kind of a situation and you're not using it on the phone with the people that you're servicing, then you may not be eligible for it. But if you're working at the front counter and it's getting high usage.
I think her issue is that did we, when this was ever thought of, did we ever consider, well, why wouldn't we give it to people who speak French?
Well, again, because of the usage issue, we don't have demand for that typically.
That doesn't mean they don't have access, those people. We do have
Absolutely.
have a huge
Yes.
interpreting department who we use for access issues. But there are a lot of instances where employees, they're there at the counter or something and they can assist people without having to get.
Differential, 3%?
Actually, it's 50 cents and $1 is what we had previously.
Really?
And that's based on proficiency level.
There was a hand in the back.
Patricia?
Yes, ma'am.
So in Washington, we do the same thing. We decide which languages are our highest based on our interpreters. And we don't pay somebody who speaks French a differential. Our high languages are Spanish, Russian, and Vietnamese. Sometimes those change. Sometimes they change spots, but we change just the 5 highest because we have had people ask, I speak French. That's nice.
I just picked that out. I mean, I think you're right, and that's what we do, and based on our need. I don't think it's ever been raised that we're
Discriminating?
I'm sorry?
Discriminating
Against other employees
No.
who speak other language. I don't think that's ever been raised. Maybe it could be. Yes, ma'am.
We don't call it a bonus, in our court. We do it the same it has to be something you're using every day in your job, and we just call it bilingual pay. But it has to, just like you, if somebody's in the back and speaks that language, they're not interacting with the public, so it's not part of their job description, whereas like in self-help, we want Spanish speakers, or in our community also Vietnamese speakers. So it has to be connected to your job, and then it's not really a bonus, it's just part of your job.
And a good example for us where it really is helpful is we have our own security force in Maricopa County. I don't know if your courts have that, but I mean, at the front entrance, it is a huge benefit to have that skill at the entrance coming in, because a lot of issues can be easily addressed if you're able to communicate better, rather than, if you can't communicate, you have issues that escalate. So that's just one area where we think it's very beneficial and why we offer it.
So I'd like just to make a side note related to all of this. And so while I know competitive pay is really important to both us and our employees, and then these pay differentials for some of these special skills are important, for employee engagement, pay is not at the top of the list. It has, on the drivers, by the way, on the very back page, number 9, more resources and competitive pay hit the list last year for the first time in about a decade. So, okay, we can all say we kind of went through the recession or the depression, and so there might be reasons why it fell off the list from employees telling us what's going to help them be engaged. But I just don't want you to leave saying, we got to go back and advocate for more pay. Yes, I think that's a good thing to do and commendable, and you want it to be market-driven, et cetera. But there's other things that you can do to make a difference in employee engagement levels than just give people pay.
And that's kind of what I want to point to as my last piece. On the sheet that Brenda handed out earlier on the back, you see there's those 9 engagement drivers she identified. And I got this from her, I guess, a week ago, and I'm reading this, and maybe this is a suggestion for you. I went down there and evaluated each one of these statements to guess what we have done or are doing. And I think this is an excellent guide for you to do that. For instance, in the future of the organization, I mean, how many of you, we asked the question, how many of your employees know your vision? Know the vision of what? I mean, we all think we understand our employees, but do your employees know the vision of your organization? So for us, that strategic planning process, we did just that. And we're about to do a campaign, more videos, but we're going to get leadership judges involved, because that's how important I think it is to communicate to our employees about the mission, vision, and values that we stand for. So that's one of the things. And I went down and I was very happy, and I've got to compliment these folks. Most of these we're either doing right now or have on our project list to do. And so it made me feel very good that at least we're on the track, I think, based on the evidence and the research, that we're on the track to improving the engagement of our employees. So let me open it up for questions to any one of us or all of us, or anything you want to. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned that you were thinking about doing a follow-up survey, and I'm just curious, will you be making any changes to your survey instrument, things that you didn't think of asking the first time?
Yes, and I don't know, I don't have the list of them, but we did debrief after the initial survey that we did 2 years ago, and there were a number of suggestions made by not only employees but managers as well, that questions we need to modify, some we maybe missed, and a couple we could probably do without. And I think when we go to do that, we're going to bring the committee back together. I had appointed, I had appointed a committee early on, before we did the first one, to say, okay, let's get out of this crazy 130 question one we're doing for the county and get to what is important we know about our employees. But yes, we will be making changes. Yes, Michelle?
So I'm amazed at what you've done, especially coming from Los Angeles, where we have almost 5,000 employees, and this seems just awesome to me, that you would get that much participation and be able to organize all of this. So I'm just interested in how you go about reaching all of your different locations and getting the word out there. It just seems like a really difficult task.
Well, again, for us, and it may not be applicable to you, the video is so easy because boom, it pops up on your computer. Here it is. Here's a message. Click on it. You want to take the survey. And so that starts the ball. But then we also thought in person has to be done. Now, we have 42 sites, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't go to 42 sites. Some of them are just standalone probation sites as well. So, but I went to all of our major courthouses, which we have 6, I think 7. I can't lose count, but tried to make sure I did those. And then strategically, I worked with our directors of adult and juvenile probation to get regional meetings with their folks about this issue. But we really tried to make sure we checked it off and got everybody. But she was right. When I first heard video, I said, "You kidding me? I'm like, video? Who the heck would want to see me?" But I think the message, not how it was delivered, but I think was very powerful then.
Wait a second. Michelle, the other thing is soliciting those committee members, they become marketeers. So they were part of, and that appreciative inquiry totally got managers and remember, if a manager's not engaged, their employees won't be engaged. We had disengaged managers too. So by having the appreciative inquiry sessions, we got them kind of part of the process, and then the committee members became part of the process. So we kind of like grew. We procreated.
I guess that was my question, which is when you go down a level, how do you ensure that at those department meetings you had buy-in from your managers as they conducted those feedback sessions to ensure that the quality of your message is getting to the next level of people that you don't have as direct control over?
I think we actually worked on those appreciative inquiry plans almost as much as the whole communication plan. So we kind of standardized what we were looking for, and we really worked on them just listening and writing down. We had stacks of sheets we had to decipher and get that into that plan. So we really let them kind of have buy-in. We had a training session with them, and then they went out and did that work. Was there 1 or 2 that probably didn't do it? Probably. That's that engagement issue. But the majority really got invested because they felt a part of it, which is what engagement is, getting people to feel like they're part of it.
And I think the key there is they trained them. They didn't just say go out and do listening session managers. They spent time kind of enhancing the skill sets of the managers and communicating what was expected.
Right. Exactly.
And away they went.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Yes, ma'am.
And I apologize, I was late, getting the vendor stuff done. But anyway.
We missed you.
But I wanted to ask, you said that you had a committee that you put together in order to do the employee engagement. And how did you decide who was on that committee?
I put a committee together specifically to redraft the questionnaire, the questions. That was specific. The overall management and administration of this whole project was, for me, my executive team, and which consists of 12 people. Dana is part of that, and so directors of departments and so forth. So that was the group that decided to go ahead with it. Really, that kind of based on what we're doing, we need to do this. And my only caveat is okay, but we got to come up with a plan of how we're going to deal with it once they tell us. And there's nothing to me worse than that. You sit there with it. So, any questions or any areas that we didn't cover that you might have a question about or not sure about? If there's anything you saw that you want to have, let us know. We will certainly email it to you. Anything you saw here is available for your use if you want it. So,
Your
I'm sorry?
last.
Oh, I always end with this. What does that say? Good ideas
Thought without action.
equals squat. Remember that going forward. Hey, thank you very much.
Intention.
You've been a great audience, and we appreciate it.